Oh, yeah, that's fast. The one in the courthouse.
Church bells, the
Oh, there we go. Mitch to get settled.
I just saw Amy, Mitch, and she said, we got to keep it quick. You got trivia at 7 tonight.
Yeah. Priorities, man.
Did you know that they started trivia on Monday nights next door?
Yes.
A huge group of people in there
Where?
at Archie's.
Where?
Archie's next to Rare Bird.
Oh.
They're having Monday night trivia now. I'm going to start going. I love trivia. I'm really good. We should form a team. Welcome, everyone, to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Traverse City Planning Commission, March 5th. Before we call the roll, I would like to share a land acknowledgement. The land in which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Do we need to call roll?
I should.
Commissioner Teller?
Here.
Commissioner Hershey?
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Here.
Commissioner Knapp?
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Present.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
You don't call him, right?
Yeah, you're fine.
Do we have any announcements?
None at this time.
The next order of business is the approval of minutes, consideration of approving the minutes of the February 26, 2024 meeting of the Planning Commission, and consideration of approving the minutes of the February 21st, 2024 Joint Planning Commission City Commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
No motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is old business. We have 3 public hearings tonight. The first public hearing is in consideration of an application received by Boardman Building LLC, designated applicant of Traverse City Area Public Schools, to rezone the property at 412 Webster Street from R2 to D2 and for possible action. Mr. Winter, would you like to provide an overview?
Yeah, as we discussed last month, the applicant has a purchase agreement on the property with TCAPS. They intend to preserve and save the building and are exploring a number of different uses, primarily residential, may have a commercial component, but all of which is still being worked out at this time. However, the current zoning of R2, which is 2-family, is not supportive of really rehabilitating and repurposing that building. So we've been working with the applicant for a number of months now, exploring what the best fit would be to possibly rezone that property. And we had recommended D2 because when you look at the future land use map, that property is bisected between the TC3 and TC5. TC5 being the downtown future land use category, intending for a denser development pattern. TC3 is more reflective of the neighborhood to the east and north, which is traditional neighborhood. Moreover, by rezoning this to D2, you would be extending the existing D2 district along 8th Street just on the other side of the alley to capture this parcel. What it would do by rezoning it to D2 would prevent spot zoning from occurring, which is something that we tried not to do. We tried to zone districts, not individual parcels, and most municipal attorneys would frown upon that. So at this time, I would remind the Planning Commission, you're not reviewing a specific site plan. You are just simply determining the land use classification with this request. As I mentioned, the applicant does in fact wish to preserve the building. That's why they're involved in this. If for some reason they walked away, a future owner may have additional options. But if I understand it correctly, and the applicant may speak to this more, there is some call-outs in the purchase agreement. I believe it can't be demolished for 25 years. And does TCAPS have a right of first refusal to buy the property back, or? Okay. Not in that language. But there are some backstops incorporated in that purchase agreement, which has been covered in the media before and talked about last month as well. So the purchase agreement, as I've understood it in our conversation, is structured to facilitate the rehabilitation of that building. So those protections are in place. So that is really all I have now. Happy to answer questions. As I mentioned, the applicant is here if you would like to receive an overview.
I'm sorry, would an R2 allow for the proposed use as multi-housing?
No. No, it's basically limited to 2 families per lot.
Got it.
And given the position of the building on the site, dividing it into other lots to get more density in the event that the building wasn't there, it makes it difficult.
Yes. The blocks between Boardman and Wellington, that this is at the south end of, are currently listed as R2 on our zoning map, which in theory it makes sense to have a higher zoning classification between an R1 area and higher density commercial. But to my looking just across the street here, it seems that it's all single family housing. Is there any density that exists higher than R1?
Along Boardman Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah, so between Washington and between Washington and State, I believe it is, on the east side, just south of the alley right there, there are 2 homes on one parcel. One home actually is accessed off the alley. So the R2 zoning does not require that 2 dwelling units be in the same structure. They can be 2 separate structures. And so when those 2 homes were built, that's what occurred there. So I believe
So
that
it wasn't
model,
a lot split.
It wasn't a lot split. I believe it's a site condo. So
Okay.
each unit is owned independently, and then you have the common areas.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner have any questions? And again, the applicant is here. We heard from them at the last meeting. Okay, this is a public meeting. We can open up public comment at this time on this issue. Does anybody have any public comment to share? Okay, so seeing none, I would like to close the public hearing. Does the commission have any more deliberation that they would like to make? Then I would entertain a motion.
A
That's in
motion.
your packet.
From the text here, I move that the application submitted by Boardman Building LLC authorized applicant to rezone the property located at 412 Webster Street, commonly known as the Ida Tompkins Building, from R-2 Mixed Density Residential District to D-2 Development District be recommended to the City Commission for approval.
Support, considering that the existing use and building type does not conform with the existing zoning code, and I don't think we would want future reuse to be brought into compliance with the zoning code in this parcel.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
There goes everyone.
Oh, you're all leaving now? Thank you for
Made
being
it painless
here.
for you.
Ken and Jerry, I'll be in touch about when this will go to the City Commission. Yep.
Nice seeing you again, Ken. Next, under Old Business B, a public hearing in consideration of the City of Traverse City Capital Improvement Plan, CIP, 2024-25 through 2029-30, and possible approval. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so last month, again, we presented the CIP, the Capital Improvements Plan, to the City Planning Commission. This is a 6-year plan that outlines capital projects that fall into a couple different criteria. There's been 4 bullet points of threshold of what qualifies for a capital improvement project. And these are typically projects that staff identifies because they're required through a legislative mandate. So an example that was discussed at last night's City Commission meeting is the lead and copper water service line replacement. That was handed down by state legislature, and so those are projects that we have to implement and we have to fund. Other projects include those that address capacity concerns, assets whose condition is exceeding their useful life, or in some cases, projects that are specifically called for in our planning documents. There wasn't a lot of change to this one from the previous year. We were instructed by the city manager to not just keep adding projects if there wasn't a feasible way to fund it. It needs to be used as a tool to inform the city manager and the city commission on projects to incorporate into the budget. With that being said, I just want to emphasize that not everything in the CIP gets budgeted, nor is it required for a project to be in the CIP in order to be budgeted. So, any citizen could contact their elected officials who approve the budget and advocate for projects outside the CIP. So it's not a one and done, the only way to get things funded. So just wanted to emphasize that. We, at the last meeting, discussed having you all send questions of any specific projects that you have. We did not receive any, except Shay had one question that was more kind of process. So I said I would speak to that in the memo. And I'll paraphrase, correct me if I'm incorrect on this because I don't have it in front of me. But it was regarding like sidewalks, for instance, how we do sidewalks. If there is a repair or something like that, that just gets funded with the DPS budget. For instance, they were meeting, I think just last week, with a contractor that they hire each year to go around where we have offsets and grind them down so that you eliminate the trip hazards. If we're reconstructing a street, the sidewalks get redone as part of that typically. Currently, though, we do not have any large-scale sidewalk projects programmed like what you were used to a couple years ago when we had safe routes to school, pavement preservation, and gap and infill operating simultaneously. And really the only reason that there aren't any major projects related to sidewalks on deck is it's funding. So a number of years ago, the City Commission approved increasing the taxable rate by 1 mil. So that's $1 per $1,000 of taxable value on your property, which given our city's tax roll generates just over $1 million a year. That was earmarked for streets. When we did those massive sidewalk projects, the city actually voted to bond that so they could do it all at once. So now of that mill, about 35% or 350,000 we're using every year just to pay off the sidewalk debt. And we probably have 12 more years on that. So we got a lot done at once, but it has kind of hindered us a little bit financially to do more. It may have been the right call at that time. I know the argument was made. It's only going to get more expensive in the future to do these projects. So by bonding it and doing it at once, you also save on the economy of scale too, because you get a contract to do a large amount of work. There was the question about the Arts Commission. So those don't typically go in the CIP because they have their own budget that each of their projects and expenditures have to get approved by the City Commission. So those are the only questions that we had, and happy to dive into that more if you had further questions. But the Planning Commission, after the public hearing, may decide to approve this plan. If they do, it will go to the City Commission, not for approval, just to receive and file as a report, because again, it is used as a reference tool for creating the budget. That's it.
Do any commissioners have any questions? And again, we are talking about the location, character, and contact as it relates to the master plan. Questions? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to make public comment about the capital improvement plan? Seeing none, that I close this public hearing. And there is a motion at the end of the memo. Would anybody like to make the motion, please?
I'll motion. Motion to approve the City of Traverse City Capital Improvement Plan 2024-25 through 2029-30 as presented, and to distribute the plan to the City Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we have a public hearing in consideration of the Traverse City Light and Power Capital Improvement Plan, CIP 2024-25 through 2029-30, and possible approval. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so this is the same thing with the Light and Power Capital Improvement Plan. They are part of the city, but they are a separate component unit of government, it's called. So they have their own budget, they have their own board, and they create, per charter, their own CIP. In the past, this had always been within our CIP. They would create their own, then they were kind enough to upload it into our Lucity program. The design team, who provides a lot of input on the CIP, felt that that was unnecessary. Even though we appreciate it from them, we didn't want them to necessarily have to do that step. So that's why it's coming to you as a separate document this year, but same thing, per charter, you will review this, and if approved, it will go to the City Commission for reference.
questions about the Light and Power CIP? Is there any public comment about the Light and Power CIP? Okay, I close the public hearing, and we would entertain a motion that was at the end of that memo.
No motion. Excuse me, motion to approve the Traverse City Light and Power Capital Improvement Plan 2024/25 through 2029/30 as presented, and to distribute the plan to the City Commission.
Support.
We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next is item D, discussion of short-term rental regulations committee composition. You may recall that at the joint meeting, we had a discussion with the city commission, and there seemed to be interest in us forming a committee for the rental regulations. So, Mr. Winter, what else would you like to say about that?
Yeah, so we have been discussing creating that committee, and we wanted to get some feedback from the Planning Commission on the composition or the representation on that committee. We've been speaking internally. We have some suggestions that we'd like to run by you and, of course, gather your input on it. So what we were looking at, as I mentioned in the memo, is it would be nice to have at least 3 planning commissioners on that. Ideally, but not required, 3 that are not already on the riparian buffer committee. That way, we're balancing the workload a little bit. Other representation that we discussed included a member of the DDA staff. Arguably, we have the highest concentration of short-term rentals downtown. I have spoke to the interim CEO, Harry Burkholder, and he would be willing to serve in that role. Harry himself is also a planner by training, so he has a lot of expertise to bring to the table. We considered a realtor as an option. Realtors who understand the market could come and maybe speak and be part of that conversation. A short-term rental property manager to further help understand the operational aspect of the short-term rentals. We reached out to the clerk's office. We would recommend bringing in Becky Adler. She is the one that handles all the licensing through the clerk's office, so that's another component of this that I think should be part of the conversation and sharing that feedback. And with that, we were looking at 2 to 3 additional citizens as well. Possibly if we could find a citizen who was also an owner of a short-term rental, they have a stake in it and they may have some insights. But other than that, we would just probably do like we did for the repair and buffer zone, create an application online that we distribute through the media as well as the city's communication channels and accept applications on that. So that's kind of what we're thinking about right now. But like I said, we'd be happy to hear your feedback and any insights that you'd like us to consider.
Do we have any idea, I'm sorry, do we have any idea, like a meeting schedule, once a month, a couple times a month? Or are we gonna kind of get the group together and let them kind of drive that?
I would think initially we would propose a once-a-month schedule, but if the committee wants to take it in a different direction, and some of that's just from staff perspective, that oftentimes those meetings provide direction for us and work that we need to do in between this and the riparian and the other projects. We want to make sure that we're capable of meeting any deadlines that are required. And these would be public meetings, so they'd be open to the public and properly noticed, so that also creates lead time. We have to get the agendas put together, we have to have them published to the public and things.
Does anybody have any suggestions of the makeup of, not the planning commissioners, but other people who should serve on this committee?
There's quite a bit of, oh, sorry, Mitch.
Well, I had a recommendation for a planning commissioner, not being present, Brian McGillivray, unless he's expressed opposition to being on the board.
But right now I'm
But
asking
yes.
other people, not the planning commissioners, but other,
I mean, I can
People
think of people that meet the criteria that Director Winter outlined of various stakeholders in the discussion, but I'm sure Director Winter also has people that he could name in those categories.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us on staff are intending to hand pick, but we would set the criteria and open up the applications and probably put it on the application page, like these are the qualifications that we're looking for, the roles, and then we would review them with the chair, like we're doing with riparian, and try to select ones that appropriately check the boxes.
Yeah, I'm not saying handpick, I'm merely thinking of names of people that have been part of the discussion the last time it was before the board.
I'm sure they will make their participation known.
It was brought up at the last meeting or the meeting before that, maybe in public comment about enforcement. Would it be wise to have someone on the city side who is on the enforcement side?
So the code enforcement officer is in our office, or our department, and we would probably have him either serve as an advisory role, share information, but not really sit on the committee. Like writing ordinances is not his strong suit. You know, he's a retired detective and things like that. We've talked with him about this. He's happy, like I said, to share information, recommendations, and things like that. But he'd be willing to do that.
Yeah,
But it's possible that there could be
Katie
something on the agenda at this meeting about enforcement, and then he would come and present.
yeah, so long as there's, you know,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
interchange
Dialogue
interface.
about that.
Yep.
What do you think about somebody from the tourism industry?
Yeah, it's a good recommendation.
How big is this committee gonna be?
Large.
I mean, because I was gonna suggest like somebody from a hotel. I mean, they kind of have a different view, a different stake in it, but you also don't want it to be so big.
Well, they could fit under tourism industry.
Yeah,
Sure.
And it could be somebody that has managed properties that maybe included short-term rentals
Yeah.
or hotels at different times.
So to your question, Shay, with the addition of someone from the tourism industry, that brings the total at this point to 11, which is a pretty healthy
Well, we don't want
number. If you get much larger, it does become unwieldy. But that's not to say that others can't participate.
Yeah.
Because they're public meetings, there will be public hearings, and there will be opportunity for input and
and
discussion.
presentations, there could
And
be
presentations,
presentations,
yeah.
so. I'd like that list, do you
Yeah.
like that list? Okay, so let's get to the planning commissioners who would like to serve on this committee. Jess Heller's raised her hand. David Knapp has
set.
raised his hand. I would like to be on it myself. I'm not on the other committee. And if Brian wants to serve on it, he can, because I can be a floater. Because the chair, because we changed the bylaws to say the chair may or may not serve, so I could be a floater. So we can ask Brian if he wants to serve.
Yeah.
And then there would be 12, which is kind of not good. It's an even number. That work for everyone?
That works.
We don't need a vote, do we?
Nope,
on
I
this?
just, like I said, wanted to gather some feedback, so I appreciate your consideration on that.
Anybody else have any more feedback on that? Okay. Well, is there any new business?
Done.
Oh, this is going to be a short meeting. Reports, city commission report.
Well, we had a meeting yesterday. We discussed a number of topics ranging from drinking water pipe replacement to there was parking deck repairs to, I'm trying to think if there was anything related to directly to planning and zoning, and not really coming up with anything.
The only thing that would relate somewhat to us, since it's not fully in our department, we're still figuring out where it lives, is they approved the contract with Wade Trim last night for the community development block grant planning process. So that is a program administered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We were notified in the fall that we are a new entitlement grantee. It's because we are the core city in the newly established Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a regional transportation planning body. We reached that designation by crossing a certain population density in our region. So that opens us up to additional federal funding. So as a byproduct of that, we are now again a CDBG grantee. This program provides approximately $372,000 annually from the federal government to be used on projects related to low or moderate income housing. There's a wide range of how that can be used. Leslie's actually taking the lead on this, but this is all new to us. It's federal funding, a lot of requirements. So we realize that we have a short timeline. We have to have the draft plan to HUD, our field office, by May 17th, 45 days before July 1, in order to start receiving some reimbursable funds this year. What we need to create is a 5-year consolidated plan, and then within that plan, every year we come up with an action plan of how we plan to utilize those funds through what programs. So that's kind of where we are with that. Did you have more to add on it? Okay. So, yeah, we're learning a new language called federal spending regulations.
Fun.
It's a lot of fun.
How much money was it, Sean?
So it's $372,000 roughly. It's an appropriation from the federal government, so that can vary. But it's not, it's a repeating fund each year unless the program somehow went away, which a lot of communities participate in this. Of that $372,000, you can use up to 20% for administrative costs. They recognize that a lot of these communities maybe don't have the staff and need to hire consultants like we are, so that is not going to come out of the city's general fund. It'll be reimbursed through this program. You can also use up to 15% of the funds each year towards public services. So if there's a nonprofit that aligns with those program goals, you could use it, and then they can use it to fund staffing or something like that. Other than that, we don't know where the money's going to go. That's what the planning process is going to determine.
Yeah.
So, yep. But it's nice to know that it's a reoccurring revenue stream that we didn't have before the fall.
Nice.
Yep.
And does it really specifically outline, other than what you mentioned, the types of projects it can be used for?
I would say, based on my understandings, there's boxes of a criteria that need to check. So when we've floated things by the regional field office in Detroit, a lot of times we get like, possibly, we'd have to see. You know, in other words, let's put together the plan, and that's why you have to have it to them 40 days beforehand, 45 days beforehand, before our fiscal year starts, so that they can say, yep, those are eligible or not. And the firm that we hired, Wade Trim, I feel very confident in. They've been doing this for a long time for a lot of communities and had glowing references. So, yeah, we'll keep you all abreast, and there will be lots of public input, and hopefully you all will participate in that process as well.
Sounds actually fascinating. It's good. Board of Zoning Appeals didn't meet. Grand Traverse Commons Joint Planning Commission
Hasn't met.
and the Riparian Buffer Ordinance Committee hasn't been put together yet.
But Leslie could provide an update.
Yes, Leslie, please
Mr.
provide an
Burgle.
update.
So I can tell you that I think the total number of applications that we received is somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 people.
Wow.
We more than have the number of people meeting the criteria that we were looking for, namely people that are residents, riparian owners or residents on Grand Traverse Bay, on Kids Creek, on Boardman, Ottaway River, and Lake. So we just want to get a flavor from every kind of riparian owner to be represented on that group. And everyone is very well positioned to serve on that. And so right now I'm kind of looking at schedules to see what makes the most sense and how we can incorporate staff and other experts on those committee meetings when it works for everybody. So very soon we'll get with you as we do need the chair to appoint these members to the committee and set that meeting schedule as well.
I look forward to that. Thank you. Any planning department reports?
Really nothing more coming out of the department. There's one thing I did want to bring up, and that is the March 19th study session that we have coming up. The item that is intended to be on that agenda at this point is a presentation from the DDA CEO, Harry Burkholder, to provide an overview of what the DDA is, what they do, as well as the DDA's TIF plan, the tax increment financing. You may have heard about this a little bit in the media. As planning commissioners, you may be asked questions by the public, and we want to provide you the opportunity to be informed in those conversations, and as well as to ask Harry any specific questions. So he has an overview that he would like to provide One thing he did ask today, and I'll have Katie send out an email after this, is that you can respond to. If you have any specific questions that you want included in his presentation, you're not limited to those. If you have questions that come up on the fly, of course, you'll be able to discuss them. But please feel free to send them ahead of time so we can make sure that they're addressed, especially if there are any questions that require data that needs to be provided. He wants to be set up to serve you, so if you need that, ask ahead of time, and it will be provided as best as possible. But hopefully it, again, is informative to you, and we can help everyone understand it, not just you, but the public that may be
That might be
in
watching.
attendance. Yep.
So it's very important to come up with questions, whatever you can think of, about what the DD is, what TIF is, how TIF works, all that kind of stuff. Please submit the questions when you get the email, so we can pare them down, because there could be many, and for Harry's presentation.
And that's all I have for now.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on any issue?
I know, my name's Kara Galvin. I'm a resident on 439 Webster. I know you're just talking about the makeup of the committee for short-term rentals, but I figured I'd use this as a time to talk about it. I'm a Traverse City resident. I'm a real estate broker owner. I'm also a short-term renter owner. I'm also an owner of a property management company, and I'm a member of Aspire North's Public Policy Committee. So this has become kind of my life. And I was heavily involved in the, is it 2018, 2009, or when it changed from C1 to C1, C2 to C3, C4. So I'm up here not to even have a true opinion of one way or the other, but kind of just, I guess, put into the minds of moving forward of some of the things I noticed of that switch, and then also things that are happening in other townships that have switched in the recently. And so when the C1, C2 to C3, C4 happened, I think that a ball was dropped in the sense of not having a cap. I am a proponent for reasonable regulation, which might be rare for my type, but where having a grandfather in C1, C2, and then have an unlimited cap in C3, C4, kind of just opened up everything to have short-term rentals. And then that switch also allowed Trailside to flip just because of the zoning alone, and also not having a cap. I think if it was capped, it wouldn't have been worth the investors' time to do what they did. So what else? And then just thinking of things moving forward, if you do go with a cap, stuff like what happened in East Bay could happen, where they have capped it lower than the permits they have out there right now. And I have talked to many, many people who now pretty much have said they never plan on selling their house, because if they sell, their permit goes away, and they can't get as much money for the house, but also it's money making. They're usually locked in good interest rates. So I think the idea that they were going to get rid of them was kind of short-sighted, and I think if anything, people are holding on to those houses. And then also enforceable regulations. I own in a few townships that have kind of weird things, like only a certain amount of nights a week, a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. I just don't think it's enforceable, and I think it opens up you guys to problems of neighbors complaining, but you really having no way to do anything about it. And then I do still agree with the new builds having a certain percentage of short-term rentals, and the fact that I really do think it will help offset building costs, especially downtown Traverse City. But, yeah. And I also think that a lot of times short-term rentals are used as a way to play off of affordable housing. I don't think that a lot of the things that go back into the market are what you would call affordable housing. So I just think getting out of that mindset is a good long-term goal. But, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, that's the end of public comment, and move to adjourn, anyone?
So moved.
Okay.
Short meeting.
It was,
We're
congratulations.
done before our regularly scheduled time would have been before we shifted it.
That's true.
Yeah. If you were here for school, if you want to bring up your forms, we'll send them for you.
Yeah.
You got lucky tonight.
You
That was a
really
short
did.
one.
I told one of the
lucky.
moms that you were a former teacher, so you would be happy to sign these forms.
But
Love
I do
helping
want
the
you to
students.
understand what you just watched.
As a teacher.
So there's certain things that have to go before a public hearing, and you happened to be here on the night that there were 3 of them. Now, sometimes there would have been 50 people in here lining up and making comments on some of the things at the public hearing. This just wasn't one of those nights. So I'm sorry, it was.
I'm sorry.
Kira,
I'm sorry you
I'm
had to
so
go
sorry
home in
you
a
didn't
decent
learn
hour.
more.
Okay, that's what I thought. So, and then Connor emailed too, so
So
that he had mentioned you were interested
David,
and stuff.
Jess.
So keep your eyes open for that
I
application.
think Katie will get in touch with all of us when we're going to try to put that meeting time together, because we all might have different time requirements, plus all the other people, so it may take a while.
This all one? Okay.
Where do you
Just
guys go to
remember,
school?
public participation in local government is very important in your life. Just keep remembering that.
We actually have a student on the board.
We do, but she couldn't be here tonight. We have a high school student. Oh, yeah. Yeah, she just couldn't be here tonight, but yeah, they have fun on this.